Hello, everyone. This is the American Werewolf. I'm here to talk to you today about Sydney Sweeney's latest project, Immaculate, now playing in theaters. I caught it yesterday at my local cinema house. And this was a film that was incredibly modestly budgeted at $9 million. That's incredibly cheap in today's Hollywood. And it seems to be on the way to the land of profit. That's PRFIT. As of within 2 days, it seems to have made more than $5 million. It probably will have a good second weekend. That's my prediction, because horror fans will enjoy it. It's not the greatest story you've ever heard of before. In fact, I didn't think much of the story at all, but it had some good points to it, and so I'll get into that now. Now, this movie is directed by Michael Mohan, whose work I am not familiar with at all. And after this film, I will probably remember the name, but I won't be going out of my way to see more of his stuff. It will just depend on what the project is. But apparently he's collaborated with Sydney on several projects, and she hired him to direct this film as the producer of Immaculate. That's right. Sydney Sweeney, at 22 years old, I believe, was the producer of this film. This is a project she's been trying to get made for several years, and apparently she's generated enough juice and star power now to actually get it done. So good for her. Again, under $10 million, that's really amazing. Probably will make a lot of money, or a decent amount of money, along this sort of indie horror track. This is the latest in the nunsploitation horror genre, subgenre that started. I mean, you could go way back to Ken Russell's The Devils, but more recently with the Conjuring universe and The Nun, and The Nun Part 2 starring Tassia Farmiga, and now you've got Immaculate coming out. And then I saw the trailer for The First Omen, which apparently is going to be set in a convent. So this is the latest sort of it thing in horror, nunsploitation. But Sydney Sweeney brings something, and I guess you could argue Tassia Farmiga does as well. They bring sexy back into horror again, sex and sexy back into it again. Sydney Sweeney is definitely today's it girl, and there's some scenes in there that go beyond what Tassia Farmiga was doing in The Nun. Let's get into the story a little bit. Basically, it's the story of a novitiate, Sister Cecilia, played by Sweeney, who arrives at an Italian convent to complete her vows. And there it is revealed that the convent and the Catholics there, who historically are known to collect relics, have one of the nails that crucified Christ. The horror aspect of it comes from the fact that science within the Vatican has now evolved to the point where they can extract a sample of Christ's blood, and that this convent specifically, because it never really explains how far it goes up, can now extract a sample of Christ's blood, and they can generate their own Messiah. Now, that just sounds hokey as hell, but that's basically the story. And then over a period of years or decades, they have been somehow creating these immaculate conceptions inside of the young novitiate, the young nuns, hoping to generate some sort of Messiah, or, generate the apocalypse. I'm not exactly sure what it is they want to do. And that's part of the problem with this film. It's not really heavy on story, or a story that makes any sense. It's just an absolutely ridiculous premise. But I don't think that, I should be the first to admit, actually, that I didn't really go to this movie to see, Oppenheimer or Lawrence of Arabia. I went to see Sydney Sweeney, and that's a little weird when you consider that she's playing a nun. But when I talk about the sex and sexy being brought back into horror, she's using it through the lens of being a nun. And so you have nuns sort of bathing each other in the bathhouses, and they're wearing the white cotton sort of nighties. So you're getting, the nipple shots and this, that, and the other. And so I wasn't really sure how to feel about that. That's a little weird. And like I said, further than Tassia Farmiga was willing to go, so on and so forth. I think where this movie sort of lost me was where, instead of counterbalancing all the evil, because it's ridiculous how evil these nuns and the priests and everybody in this convent basically is, instead of balancing that with some good. And in my opinion, the best religious horror movies like The Exorcist, you're not going to get The Exorcist, but they have somebody like a Father Karras or a Father Merrin who holds steady, and is rock solid in their foundation, in their faith, in their goodness, or even to today's more modern horror with the Conjuring universe, where you have Ed and Lorraine Warren, where you have Tassia Farmiga in The Nun, which apparently they look like they're going to, at the end of The Nun Part 2, you see that Ed and Lorraine Warren are being brought in. Here, they go in the opposite direction, where things just get increasingly feral, more and more and more feral. And so by the end, Sydney Sweeney is basically covered in blood and smashing everything that she possibly can. So, I mean, for some people and for some fans of horror, that's going to be really appealing. For me, who's looking for a bit more of a story because I'm not 19 anymore, I was a bit let down. This is one of those films that maybe you see it when you're 19 or 20 years old and you're like, wow, this is the most amazing horror film ever. And then later in life, you look at it and you're like, wow, this was okay. This could have been much better, or it wasn't nearly as good as I remember it. I mean, to this day, I still refuse to watch some films that I watched when I was much younger for fear that it won't hold up. And I just went through that again this past weekend with the Roadhouse films and watching this new remake with Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor. And I wasn't disappointed by the film, because the original film was ridiculous to begin with. To think that a bouncer is going to stop this low-level mafia don with his fists. He's going to fist fight his way out of this town being taken over by this low-level mob of guys. Just ridiculous. So I wasn't expecting much for the second one, and I completely enjoyed it because the premise itself is ridiculous. It's supposed to be ridiculous. But I think with horror, there's always the possibility to do better. And so I was disappointed by that. Now, let me say this. And I actually had to think about this a little bit. It's been about 24 hours since I've seen it. Let me get into it here. Here's where the strengths of the movie took a bit to get through, but got through. This film is not risk averse. Now, I'm a Catholic, so I was really uncomfortable. I'm like, where's the good here? Can we have some good, just a little bit of good here? It didn't happen. But as a horror fan, I've been complaining for a long time about risk-averse stories. Not just risk-averse stories in horror, but risk-averse in Hollywood. And so with the sexploitation angle, even though it's through the weird lens of a nun, and also from the increasingly wild and frenetic and ultra-violent third act, this movie really goes for it. It really, really goes for it. Is it the greatest movie I've ever seen? No. Does it perhaps represent a long-awaited shift in Hollywood? And I saw this a couple of weeks ago when Sydney Sweeney appeared on Saturday Night Live, and everyone was just raving about how sexy she is and the cleavage and everything like that. And they're like, Sydney Sweeney has broken the woke hold over Hollywood. Like, you can't beat biology. So she might be one of the catalysts for completely finally breaking the grip that wokeism has held over these risk-averse Hollywood productions. And her work may not be for everybody, but I think she's onto something. So I appreciated I appreciated it in that sense. Now, how do I rate this? Because I don't want to give it away. I will say this one final thing. I hope she becomes more than just a scream queen, because I saw Michael Mohan in some sort of interview saying she's going to go down as one of the all-time scream queens. I hope she does more than that. But in terms of rating this film, I started out with 2 out of 5. I'm going to go to 3. I'm going to go to 3 out of 5, because it isn't that it's a terrible movie. It's the reason I originally gave it a 2 out of 5 is because my expectations weren't met. But if I look at it through the lens of just a very feral horror film, a very just sort of bone and gristle kind of thing, then this movie succeeds. So I'm going to up my rating from 2 out of 5 yesterday, initially walking out the theater, giving myself 24 hours to think about it, having this conversation now, even though it's a one-way conversation, and then, putting it out here for everybody to see. I'm going to 3 out of 5. So you've got a feral movie, sexy nuns, some really sort of gory, bloody, grisly horror, and what might be the beginning of the end of wokeism in Hollywood, which I will always support. Okay, that's my video. Like this video. I'm going to be doing more like this for relevant content. I'm going later tonight to go see Late Night with the Devil with David Dalsmalchian. I can never pronounce his last name right, but I'm going to be uploading more of these as I catch them. Like this video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Is wokeism going to die? Is Sydney Sweeney, is she the new thing for horror? Did you see the movie? Did you like the movie? I think you should go see it. Go see it. Decide for yourselves. Subscribe to the channel. I will see you all in the next video. God bless you, everybody. Bye-bye.